What does that tell us about abortion when the failure of it results in a live birth? That is why I do what I do. I am literally one of those quote unquote babies who's now a 48-year-old mother who survived my own abortion. Instead of being seen as sort of like this lightning rod about abortion, I would like people to look upon us with some curiosity to say, well, wow, if that's what that means, then what should I think and believe and do about abortion?
Years ago, a 19-year-old college student faced an unplanned pregnancy. She was scared, pressured, and then late summer of 1977, she underwent a saline-infused abortion, normally used to end the life of children later in pregnancy. Yet that baby didn't die. Against all odds, she lived, and today that child, Melissa Ohden, stands as a voice for the voiceless, an advocate for those who've survived abortion, and the founder of Abortion Survivors Network. Her story is one of pain, grace, and unimaginable redemption, and it reminds us what's at stake in every life. Today, Melissa doesn't just share her story, she shares hope. She's giving a voice to hundreds who were never supposed to exist, and shining light into one of the darkest corners of our culture. From hospital rooms to Capitol hearings, Melissa Ohden is proving that every life, no matter how small, unwanted, or unexpected, has immeasurable worth. I'm Brian Westbrook, and this is Living Pro-Life. Well, Melissa, welcome to the program. We appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Melissa, as another Missourian, I'm glad to have you. The great state of Missouri, show me state. And I know we had this big, huge Amendment 3 ballot initiative last year, and we have a new Amendment 3. So tell us a little bit about what that was, and maybe a little bit about what the new Amendment 3 might look like, and how that's relevant around the country, some of these ballot initiatives around the country.
Yeah, well, and we knew, Brian, I mean, you and I as folks who have worked in the pro-life sphere for a long time, that the state of Missouri had a target on its back by the abortion industry to be the state, right, that was abortion-free post-obs. I mean, that puts a target on your back very quickly. And so it wasn't surprising that we were staring down that amendment, the first Amendment 3 that was, enshrining abortion rights. And really, I think what people didn't understand and what we tend to get, over-messaged by because of the abortion industry and their reach and, the amount of out-of-state funding and all the things they were able to do. I think what people didn't always understand is the impact of that vote. And you did a great job in particular of going out in the state and educating people on what it meant, because we can't say it enough. And that amendment was undoing all the pro-life laws that we had in our state. And that wasn't just about protecting preborn children. That was about protecting women from the abortion industry. And so right now, a woman could be injured in the state of Missouri from her abortion, and she can't even sue as a result of that. And those are the things, right, that get lost in translation in a ballot vote. And so that's what I'm hopeful for in the next amendment, is that people can understand this vote is about common sense protections that the First Amendment vote took away.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people who have been in the pro-life movement or maybe on the fringes of the pro-life movement, they say, well, didn't the Dobbs decision take care of all this? It reversed Roe versus Wade. Shouldn't we just kind of, have a party and sit back? Are we able to do that now?
No. I mean, I'm busier. I don't want to say more frantic because I don't like being frantic. We're like purposeful, but yeah, no, the work hasn't stopped. And I would say it's sort of like you're playing whack-a-mole but it's whack-a-mole in 50 states. I mean, especially in Missouri. I can say this. I mean, I don't have a problem saying this. I had a very well-intentioned member of the clergy recently, Brian, who had said, hey, what are we so worried about? We didn't have that many abortions before Roe in Missouri.
Wow.
And I had to say, thanks for bringing that up. But you understand why there weren't that many abortions in Missouri, right? Because we had laws,
Yeah.
and now we don't have laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, we're talking with Melissa Ohden of the Abortion Survivors Network. Melissa, tell me a little bit about your work with Abortion Survivors Network and the women and men that you meet around the country.
Yeah, we are the only organization around the world that comes alongside babies, right, who survived their own abortions. That feels weird to have to say about, being 48 years old, 70 years old. But that is, again, what the world does not often talk about or recognize, which is, yes, right, babies in utero survive all types of abortion procedures across all gestations. We did before Roe. Many of us, like me, survived during Roe. And you and I both know that babies are surviving abortions still today, even with the abortion pill. And yes, we see high numbers of successful abortion pill reversals when women are given that information, a second chance at life and hope for that baby and for that mother. But babies do also survive the abortion pill as is. And,
Yeah.
The Ethics and Public Policy Center put out those really shocking studies in the spring of 2025, not only highlighting what we knew to be true about the high complication rates, sending women to the ER with all sorts of complications, but also the high rates of abortion pills failing. And so they found 1 in 19 women in those insurance records, 1 in 19 had abortion pills fail, went on to have a repeat abortion with that baby, that pregnancy, again within 45 days.
Wow. Well, let's talk about just the language you just used, which is the abortion pill failed. And they call it a failed abortion. But what actually happens in a failed abortion?
A baby lives. And, like, people are shocked by that, though, and rightfully so when we are told it's a choice and a right. And hey, it's not a big deal, right? It's not a big deal to have an abortion. It's not a big deal to take the abortion pill. It's just, right? It's safer. It's as safe as Tylenol. But yet women are ending up in the ER and septic and hemorrhaging and all those things. And, what does that tell us about abortion when the failure of it results in a live birth?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, that is why I do what I do. I am literally one of those quote unquote babies who's now a, 48-year-old mother who survived my own abortion. And that should be shocking to people. And it should jar our consciences. It should drive us to action. It should lead us to ask questions about abortion and what the laws of the state are, what the laws are federally, what the impact is, all of those things. Instead of being seen as sort of like this lightning rod about abortion, I would like people to look upon us with some curiosity to say, well, wow, if that's what that means, then what should I think and believe and do about abortion?
Yeah. Tell our listeners, you said you failed your own abortion. Tell us a little bit about that story and how they might be able to find out even more about that.
Yeah, so my story, like most survivors, is pretty complicated because abortion complicates people's lives. It doesn't make things simpler. My birth mother was like many women still today. I think that you guys probably encounter on the sidewalk. She was 19. She was a college student. She was forced by her family to have the saline infusion abortion that was intended to take my life. The pieces of our story that make it a little bit different are really just the God incidences that are beautiful and amazing. But that's what I want the world to recognize, is that the only good, right, uplifting parts of my birth mother's experience and mine are those miracles. Abortion would have ended my life, full stop. And that ends generations. And it would have invited even more suffering into my birth mother Ruth's life than what she had. But we know through my medical records, her abortion lasted 5 days. They started to think she was going to lose her life. And understandably, they thought I would lose mine. And I think it's really interesting, Brian, the things people say sometimes about failed abortions. I've had people who said, hey, don't take it personally. We didn't know you.
Wow.
I mean, therein lies the rub, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't take it personally, but yet I do, that I was being poisoned and scalded for 5 days, which was intended to be my death. And, like a lot of abortion survivors, like a lot of women who are going through their abortions not going the way they planned, they didn't know how far along my birth mother really was. The medical records state that the abortionist thought she was 18 to 20 weeks, but he hadn't performed any sort of adequate exam.
Mm.
Not a lot different than what's going on in our world today.
Right.
And so when I was born at about 2 pounds, 14 ounces in the final step of that abortion procedure, they started to piece it together. And a neonatologist remarked I was probably 31 weeks.
Wow. Wow. So what is, just for the listener's sake, what is a saline infused abortion? What was it supposed to have done?
Yeah, the saline infusion abortion was the most common procedure performed back in the 1970s into the 80s. And folks can read about it in an article called in the Philadelphia Inquirer called The Dreaded Complication. And it was up for a Pulitzer Prize. It was a really difficult read, but it was a behind the scenes look at saline abortions in particular. And, it involved injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding the preborn baby in the womb. And the intent of it was to poison and scald the child to death. So usually lasted about 3 days. And, really child would lose their life within usually about the first 24 hours. And then the rest of that time was spent inducing labor. And so that's when they started to realize when the baby was born, that there was a high failure rate. And so even back then, the CDC was saying, yeah, we estimate 300 to 400 live births from, these failed abortions. Well, anytime the CDC is going to tell us that, we all can sort of figure out the number is going to be much higher. And we still don't have super definitive numbers. The best guess we can get at is really based on correlating failure rates of abortion in other countries like Canada. And so when we do that, it looks like a failure rate of about 0.2% of surgical abortions alone leads to about almost 1,800 surgical abortion survivors every year in the United States.
Well, we heard from some political candidates and also governors and other politicians around the country who say, well, if a child survives an abortion, well, we'll just give them some comfort or maybe not. And we'll have a discussion at this point of whether or not we're actually going to give them life-saving care. I think that's deplorable. But what have you seen of people who are talking about this kind of issue? I think there was a bill called the Abortion Survivors Bill. Tell us a little bit about that and help us educate us on that topic.
Yeah, and this has been an educational policy issue for over 13 years. I mean, we're probably pushing 15 years. There is no federal protection, Brian, for babies who survive abortions. That is usually the first talking point that is thrown out by folks who are supporting abortion, who are like, no, there's laws against that. No, the 2002 piece that people often talk about that was signed, it was just a simple statement, right? A definition saying babies who survive abortions are human beings just like everybody else. There was no consequence, no teeth for failing to provide medical care. And so in the early to even pushing closer to 2010, there were a number of cases, even within the United States, of babies like me surviving their abortions and facing horrific treatment. I mean, we often think of Gosnell, but long before Gosnell was snipping spinal cords, we have folks like an abortionist in Florida who coming face to face with a living, breathing baby who survived their abortion, and the mom was right there. The treatment for that baby was to have them put in a biohazard bag, still breathing, and throw them on the roof of the abortion clinic. And it took days for that baby to be found. And so that's what gets covered up, right? Time and time again in our culture. Or we're told that that's such an outlier, right? Of like, oh, or the Dr. Klopfers from Indiana who had babies, right? The bodies of deceased babies in his trunk.
Wow.
And yet we're told that every single one of those instances is an outlier.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, abortion is taking the life of a little innocent child. That's really all it is. And regardless of how far along you are or not, I mean, these are real children with real lives, and it's hard not to take it personal, right? You mentioned that it would scald the baby, and when I look at you now, it doesn't look like you have a bunch of burns. Tell me about that story and maybe how God intervened there.
So many God stories in my life. When I was first rushed off to the NICU, and I think this is an interesting and important talking point, which is that late-term abortion took place at a hospital, as many still do today. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm alive, because if I would have survived at a Planned Parenthood, they have no capabilities to ensure that the baby is provided medical care. And, in various hearings that I've testified before, either at the state level or at the national level, they have fought against simple things like having a crash cart there, having admitting privileges, right? All of those things that would allow the child to receive timely, adequate medical care. And so that's sort of, first of all, how I'm here today, because it was at a hospital and because a nurse was willing to defy the orders to just leave me to die. And I'm forever grateful for that. I have not met that one particular nurse, but I have met the nurse who received me in the NICU that day. I actually met her face to face earlier this year. And, it was a blessing for me this year on my birthday to text her. And not that I hadn't before, but now that we've met, to just have this really vibrant relationship and for me to say, right, thank you for what you did 48 years ago. And that's what I think the Lord wanted, is not only for me to be able to live, but for me to be able to know these people and share the stories with the world, because it reminds us that abortion affects more than just that woman. It reminds us that it affects all of us. And I hope that it gives people encouragement to say, you know what, I can do something, right?
Yeah.
I may not be Jan receiving Melissa in the NICU, but I can be like Jan.
Yeah.
And I can pray for these babies. I can pray for these moms. I can always remember them. I can find a way that I can get involved. And because of nurses like Jan, I am alive. I was provided incredible medical care and loved on. And even though the doctors thought I had a fatal heart defect because I was under so much distress after being poisoned and scalded, I was suffering from severe respiratory and liver problems. I suffered from seizures. They weren't sure how many disabilities I would face in my life. And, here I am today at the age of 48, having lived probably a healthier life than most people. Now, do I have to do a fair amount of, work in terms of staying well physically and doing a lot of emotional and spiritual healing? Absolutely. But we all do.
Yeah. You talked about your birthday. A lot of people on their birthday, it's this, presents and cake, and they blow the candles out and these kind of things. And, for those who have survived an abortion, birthdays may look and feel a lot differently. So tell us about that.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of like everyone else. You go through these stages of, depending on what else is happening in your life or what your relationship is like with your biological family or the details that you have, right? It can all be different. But I can say that there is, in many ways, I think we have this greater feeling of blessing about being alive, but at the same time, it's very complicated. It's mixed with a lot of grief. And, I was telling some people in a different interview, I woke up one day recently, right before my birthday, and I sort of had one of those moments. And I went, what day is it? And I was thinking, oh, it's August 24th. And I realized just before I even got out of bed, I went, oh no, that was the day the abortion started. And so then I go through that every single day leading up to my birthday, right? It's day 2, it's day 3, it's day 4. And then I get to my birthday and then I have to grapple with the fact that, oh, that's yay, right? Thank the Lord I was born, except I also can't celebrate because then I was laid aside with the demand to leave me to die. And so I go through this phase every year where then I have to kind of take a deep breath when I look at the clock and go, oh, okay, so now I know that I made it to the NICU by now.
Yeah.
You go through this, like, it's a body talk. It's a, you're talking even sort of within your brain. It's emotional. It's all of those things. And people may not be able to relate to what it's like to survive an abortion, but we all know what it's like to go through something where it leaves a lasting impact.
Well, we heard recently about a Kentucky cheerleader who had recently given birth to a baby. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a heartbreaking story. This young cheerleader apparently gave birth and hid the baby. I don't think we have all the details yet to know if they know how long baby was alive. But we've seen and heard these stories before, and I think we always have to juxtapose it with what we see happen when, for instance, there's a safe haven law and the baby, right? There's baby boxes where that baby could be taken. And of course, then we have to grapple with the question of, so if it would have happened at Planned Parenthood, what?
Right.
It would have somehow been legal. It would have been okay.
Yeah.
What makes this different? And of course, then it begs the question of, man, who did she have to turn to, right? Did she feel like she was utterly alone? And I think this is an important one to follow too, Brian, because from a messaging standpoint, we know how the abortion industry and their lobby likes to take experiences like this and twist and turn them to ultimately make them being something about why abortion should have been necessary in the first place.
Right. Yeah. If she had gone to a Planned Parenthood or an abortion facility, then we could have killed the baby earlier and, right, taken care of the problem earlier.
Right. It must have been a law problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somehow it was all everybody's fault.
Right. Yeah. I find these stories kind of illustrate the reality of abortion, right? The reality is that we are killing a child. And the fact that you could just kill the child earlier and that would be better just seems deplorable. Tell people how they can, if they have survived an abortion themselves or can learn more about your work, how can they learn more?
Yeah, go to abortionsurvivors.org. You can find out what resources we have for abortion survivors, no matter your age, adoptive families, because there's a lot of questions about how to talk about this, how to support your survivor, how to have a relationship with a biological parent who attempted the abortion. We have lots of services and supports for women whose abortions didn't go as planned. We're the only organization that has an online community for all of these folks. But for women in particular, there is something really empowering about them having connections with other women who have walked through this.
And what about those who maybe aren't abortion survivors? How could they get engaged?
Yeah, so on our website, we have tons of research. So if folks go to, I think it's a medical professionals page, but it's full of research. First of all, get educated. There are so many research studies out there that we are often quoting and putting in the media. But I want folks to get educated about how often abortions are failing. I mean, something even out of Alberta recently, 133 late-term abortions, 25% of them survived, Brian.
Wow.
So there's a lot for people to learn. So go to our website, get educated, and read up on our pages that talk about how to be an ally, because there are so many ways that you can make a difference every single day. And by supporting abortion survivors, folks are also supporting the preborn in a huge way.
Absolutely. One last question for you. There's a lot of talk about these abortion pills. And the courts are talking about them. I know the FDA is looking into them a little bit closer. And so what's happening? Is it really shifting to abortion pills? And if so, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this recently, but I saw it on social media. They're calling them period pills. That's some curious language. But yeah, I mean, we know, again, through the Ethics and Public Policy Center, their work, but certainly what we were all seeing in the women that are reaching out to you all, to the pregnancy centers, to us, we know the impact of them physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And for us in particular, we know about the high failure rate. So not only that the further along women are gestationally, the more likely it is to fail, but we also see the number of repeat abortions throughout that pregnancy. And so we've been dealing with that for years now, that women are reaching out to us and having a lot of trauma and, being really being negatively impacted by providers saying, hey, just you're going to go ahead and have another abortion. And if that one fails, you're going to have another abortion. Again, right? If this is about empowerment, if this is about choice, why are the abortion providers keeping this information from women about the complication rates, about the high failure rate? Why would they not want to provide information to them about the supports that we offer?
Yeah, exactly. Well, just a follow-up question there. What are the next steps for people who are concerned about this abortion pill?
Yeah, I mean, again, it is about becoming very educated on the issue. And so, right, read up on it, read the petitions, follow folks both here in Missouri and also people at the national level. And don't be afraid to be reaching out to your state legislators, your federal members of Congress, and also to the FDA. This is going to continue to be something that we see talked about. But the question is, what action is going to be taken? And so even heading, this is not a political issue, but it is a policy issue. And so I want people to understand the matter of urgency related to this. If we do not start doing something now, the implications are huge.
Well, with that, the great, amazing Melissa Ohden with Abortion Survivors Network, and also a great Missourian. We are so blessed to have you in our state, but you do work all around the country and all around the world. So thank you for your work, and thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.